Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today's episode is another Turning the Tables episode, where we get asked the questions. By popular request, David Mullen is our interrogator. His credits as a cinematographer are many and include The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, United States of Tara, and Akeelah and the Bee. The topic today concerns True Grit, the movie. David, thank you for doing this. Don't be too mean to us.
To say True Grit, the movie, the last version.
Thank you for asking me to do this. I enjoyed rewatching the movie this week. It's quite a lovely little film. So it's in fact I watched it twice. So it's a nice film. I liked it.
Yeah.
A lot of my questions, I watched it again last night, and some of are ridiculously nitty gritty stuff. But before that, we get into the more macro questions. I saw an interview where you said you'd watched a number of Westerns before you did Assassination of Jesse James. So that was sort of your research. Did you discuss the genre much with the Coen Brothers before you started this film on a kind of large scale level, or just dive right into this?
Yeah, just dive right into it, really. Joel and Ethan never really talked about other movies. I can't remember one instance of them talking about another movie when we were about to do work together, except that they mentioned Shadow of Doubt when we were doing The Man Who Wasn't There, because they mentioned Shadow of Doubt because it was set in kind of a mid-California, and it had that sort of brooding atmosphere, and that's what they were after. But they said otherwise it's got nothing to do with it. So when we started talking about True Grit, first thing I remember is Joel saying, "Oh, we're going to do our version of True Grit," and I thought, "Oh, why are you going to do that?" Because the John Wayne version is so kind of well known and beloved by a lot of people. I mean, Henry Hathaway's a great director, but I don't think that was his best work by a long, long way. So I was a bit skeptical, quite honestly. So I went back to Charles Portis's book, and then before I read the Joel and Ethan script, and then I realized that they were going for a much more hard-edged kind of romantic, yes, and a fairy tale in many ways, but also a much more sort of realistic, sort of gritty take on it, as was the book. So, but again, most of the conversations only really happened once we'd start scouting. They'd never really talked much about the scripts. I mean, we might sit and be doing storyboards and stuff, but they wouldn't, I can't remember them really referencing other movies and stuff. Whereas with Andrew Dominik and Assassination of Jesse James, it was probably the opposite. I mean, he talked a lot about different movies, and we looked at a lot of visual references for that film, but True Grit, no.
I also read that you had sort of decided that the 2:40 aspect ratio was just kind of a given. You didn't really talk a whole lot about that. Was that true? Just early on, you just said, we're shooting this in 2:40, and they said, yeah, or, what point did the aspect ratio come up?
I don't know. I think at any point, really. It's like you just said. I think it was like, it was just matter of fact. That's what it would be, because by then we'd done No Country for Old Men, right? Mm-hmm. And, it was basically that kind of format again, yeah. It's a Westerns, you know what I mean? It's a Western, right. It's the landscapes, it's that world. So, I mean, in that sense, Yeah. Got to be widescreen.
Yeah, I mean, as a genre, I find it fascinating because it goes back to the earliest days of cinema. So when people say, "I want this to look like a Western," I say, well, there are silent, 4:3 black and white Westerns. There are very garish Technicolor Westerns. There are desaturated,
Right.
they're very diffused Westerns. In the 70s, I recall, A Return of a Man Called Horse is shot by Owen Roizman. It's all through double fog filters, a little like McCabe and Mrs. Miller,
Right.
right? So it's a beautiful Western, but it's very diffuse compared to what, like the
Right.
Clint Eastwood Westerns at the time, like,
Right.
which are very harsh and sharp.
Right.
So a Western's been done every way
I
possible.
never asked Owen about that choice, That is the
Yeah.
strangest choice in my mind, but I don't remember ever talking to Owen about that. It was an odd choice, but it did give it a look, a definite look.
Yeah, I don't know if the reason was it's kind of a faded, like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, it feels like a faded
Yeah.
memory or something like that. It goes against the kind of harsh reality of the action,
Right.
but that
Yeah.
was sort of the 70s also stylistic thing going on at the time. So
That's true. Yeah, the
Mhm.
70s, everyone was putting nets and diffusion on the front of the
Yeah.
lens, weren't they? It was like, really?
Well, I watched Return of the Man Called Horse because Jeffrey Unsworth in an interview had said is one of his favorite films he had seen recently. And I thought, well, if Jeffrey Unsworth likes
Oh.
this, I must watch it. But it
Ah.
looks like a Jeffrey Unsworth movie, it has that fog filtered look. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so the genre has gone through many permutations, even large format cinerama, cinemascope, this division, everything. So going back in the history that when you shot this film, it's kind of interesting. I like to look at the timeline of when movies were shot because I'm curious as to going back in time what the choices were in terms of technology and things. You shot this in the spring of 2010. So you'd been doing
Mhm.
DIs for about a decade with Oh Brother in 2000. So I noticed this is a couple technical things. Kodak had just come out with Vision 3 stocks. They'd come out with Vision 3
Yeah.
500T like a year and a half earlier, but that spring they came out with the 200T and you shot the exteriors on that stock. Kodak also obsoleted their 100T at the same time. So I saw a picture of you on the set of Company Men, which was the film you made before True Grit, and I saw 100T, Vision 2, 100T stock list on the camera, which no longer was an option when
Right.
you did True Grit. Did you? Did
It wasn't an option, but I did manage to get enough stock to shoot with that.
I did shoot some
So
Kodak
100T?
supply. Yeah, I remember now. Kodak supplied enough stock for us on True Grit.
Okay, so
they stopped.
you shot both the 200T and the 100T.
Yeah, it was 5212, 5217, and 5219. Yeah, the new 500T.
Oh, okay. So you shot with the Vision 2 200T. That was Vision.
I believe
Vision
so.
3
Yeah.
came out that year, and it was 5213. But maybe it came out right after you
Yeah.
started shooting, because often those new stocks come out in the summer.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
also noticed on a photo of you on the set that the camera was labeled 3-perf. At what point in the 2000s did you switch from 4-perf to 3-perf? Once you started doing DIs regularly, it kind of made sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's just reminding me of that because I've got a note that it was 3-perf, and I realized that's why. Because I mean, although the budget was fairly reasonable for True Grit, it wasn't enormous for the amount of traveling we had to do, apart from anything else, and so just restricting the negative. We knew we were going to scan it, so there was no reason not to widescreen 3-perf. Yeah.
And back then, when you were framing, or even now, when you frame for 240 and your negative is bigger, how much do you protect outside the aspect ratio? Do you think, well, I may need some of that top and bottom area, or you just pretty much just put everything right up to the edges of 240? Or
I was always a believer in the frame being the frame. I don't understand, didn't then and don't now, the idea of shooting multiple formats. It doesn't make sense to me. That said, just in the commercial world we were in, obviously doing a film like Blade Runner, you're kind of going to have to allow for IMAX. So, I mean, a long time ago, gone are the days where you used to hard mat the frame, right?
Yeah.
I did. And then the studio, I used to do that in the UK. The studios, American studios, go, what are you doing? Where's the rest of the picture? I think, well, what do you mean? What's the rest of the picture? The picture's the picture. But, so you had to shoot with the latitude to be able to do a different format. It was really frustrating.
Yeah. So you didn't think, oh, I may have to keep this dolly track out of the shot or this or that because in the bigger negative area.
Not in True Grit.
Okay.
Not in True Grit because we didn't really have that. Yeah.
Since this was also, in some ways, your next film was, I think, In Time, which was your first digital movie. The next year you shot In Time. So,
Right.
in terms of shooting film back then, was your practice to shoot a grayscale or gray card at the head of a roll or the head of the day or any of that sort of stuff for dailies, or did you just pretty much give notes to a dailies colorist?
I always shot a grayscale on a color chart when I remembered. And then I would sort of bicker with Andy Harris, my assistant, about why did you forget the grayscale on the color chart? Because often we would, But yeah, sometimes we'd put it on at like the end of the day. We still need to do that. But I used to be much more. I used to do it religiously, but by the time of True Grit, I was probably a bit sloppy, really. But
well, I'm about to do a film this summer, so I'm on film, so I'm thinking about those issues all over again.
I don't see why not. I mean, there's no loss to do it, is there? Yeah.
Right. I mean, the one issue I always had is doing an exterior movie is that you'd show up at dawn or pre-dawn, and you plan. It's either you bring out an HMI to light your grayscale, or you wait till the sun's up, and then it's very orangey. So then you think, well, it's the wrong color to shoot my grayscale, so you wait till it's like 10 o'clock, or by then you've shot a scene already, and before you even shoot the card, or you bring out an HMI or something.
But I think with a digital transfer, and even with a lab, you could sort of say the grayscale is like after roll 6 or something. It's only a reference, isn't it? I mean, it's not the best thing. Obviously, you want it at the beginning of the day's work, but I often would put it anywhere that was just convenient.
But did you beyond the grayscale, how much adjustments were done to dailies for the look? Like, in general, the film has a somewhat warm look, but there are some cool scenes when they're in the woods. It's warm, and then it starts snowing, and the shift of the color gets to the colder side. Is that something you had done for dailies through notes, or is that something you did later in the final color correction? That color tone?
That was mostly what we shot in camera. It was mostly done with filtration. I mean, I was shooting tungsten balance, so I liked shooting tungsten because you'd shoot with an 85 correction filter, and then if you wanted to go slightly cooler, you'd shoot with an EF, and then if you wanted to shoot even cooler, we'd shoot without a filter, so you'd get that kind of range.
Is that what you did on this
of day? Yes. And also the thing about shooting tungsten, it was a little thing we'll get into probably in a minute, is when shooting night shots, all the night work was lit with HMIs, and I would shoot the tungsten stock without filtration, and I would put maybe a quarter orange or something sometimes on the HMI, but often I would leave it clean, and then I would have the lab print it back a bit so it wasn't like full daylight blue. And then I'll control it in the DI. But what I wanted to do, knowing that I was going into the digital in a DI finish, I wanted to have the separation between the warmth of the oil lamps and the sort of practical sources, the tungsten sources, and the cold of the nightlight. So I went further than I would have done on a film if it had been just a film finish, not digital finish.
Right, knowing you can pull some of the blue saturation in a DI that you can't do in a print. So when you pulled some of the blue out of the night work, did you shoot a grayscale with a quarter blue or something, and then tell them to time it to neutral to pull some blue out, or is that just simply a note in to the Dailies colorist to time it some of the blue out? Or
No, I would do that actually. I would do that. Yeah, I would shoot a grayscale with a little bit of correction, so as a reference. But you know,
right,
by then I forget who was timing the Dailies. But you know, by then it was people that we knew, and they knew how we like to work. So
yeah. Okay. So I read that the opening shot in the movie, which is that push in on the boarding house at night when the father is lying dead in the foreground,
yeah,
that it starts out with the out of focus. The snow. The focus is on the snow falling in the foreground, and then it pushes in and it pulls focus to
yeah.
him lying there. And I read that you said that some of that push in had to be done in post because there wasn't enough room to back up the camera as far as you wanted to. There was another building in your way or something
Yeah.
behind the camera. What
There's
was
a
that?
long story there,
Yeah.
David. There's a long story. It was one of the most fraught evenings shoots I've been on with Joel and Ethan. I'll be honest, and we've talked about it. We were shooting in this town in Texas, this little town that just Goncha, the production designer, had kind of created this town out of a basis of what existed in a place called Granger, I think it was. And we had storyboarded a shot that actually pans looking down the road,
hang on.
panning with a horse as Cheney rides away and hooks over to the boarding house and then pushes in and the body of the falling snow. Well, I wanted to shoot it right at the cusp of dark, so I wanted a bit of light in the sky. And I'd lit the town, sort of, but the wind started blowing. I needed atmosphere to give distance to separate the horse from the black of the background and all these things. And it was really frustrating. It just didn't work. And I say the wind came up and it was a bit of a nightmare. And we were just going to wrap. And I said to Joel and Ethan, well, look, we're here. Why don't we just do a square push into the house? It won't take us very long. And there was pressure on us because the turnaround to the next day's start. And they were going, well, maybe should we do it? Well, if it won't take any long, let's do it. And then we can think about it and reshoot it. So we put the camera on a giraffe crane and got it as far back against the building, a porch of a building, to do this push into the boarding house. And sure enough, when they got the footage back and they decided, oh, well, we can extend that and we can make this little dot. And I mean, to me, it's one of the best openings I've ever seen in a movie. But it all comes from the circumstance where we couldn't shoot what we wanted to, and probably that was as much my mistake or lack of forethought as anything else. So it ended up where it does.
So it starts out of focus on the snow falling. That's a post effect. You shot it in focus, the whole push in, and they did the rack focus from the foreground CGI snow, because it's just a bunch of dots
Now that
sort of
I
out of
can't
focus.
remember.
Yeah, and then it rolls
That I
focus
can't
into
remember.
the wide shot. But
Yeah.
I think it's CG snow because it's a little different than the snow hitting him, which is kind
Yeah.
of more traditional snow. Cut is that
I think it is.
the
Yeah.
next cut is of that sort of twilight silhouette shot of Cheney riding away in silhouette. It's just a blue
Right.
hazy background and he's a
Right.
silhouette, but there's the dark silhouette of snow falling. And I wasn't sure if that was also done in
Right.
camera or if a post created the effect of silhouette snowflakes coming down over the shot. Because it's interesting
I
because
believe that was
it's
post.
dark snow and not light snow. It's kind of an interesting effect.
Right. I think it might have been a combination. I think we had snow and then they put more in. I mean, we had snow in the opening shot, the push in, but there's more added. There's no question. And there's more added so that it blends with where it's totally CG. And the thing is, I mean, that the camera appears to start, like 300 feet away from the boarding house. I mean, with a little dot coming into focus. So that yeah, it's there's a long section of CG there, but basically they didn't change the lighting.
Right. I'm going in order of watching the movie, and my first few questions were kind of effects oriented because the next shot was the shot of her in the train with the town reflected over the window. I think I saw behind the scenes photo of you shooting her through the window of the train, but I couldn't tell if it was a static train or a moving train, and the reflection was added in post, and was the background behind her through the window also done in post, or was it a moving train, but you still put the reflections in the foreground in post? Do you remember that shot?
I kind of remember it being a moving train, but not the glass in the foreground, because we wanted the camera to be square to her sitting in the train looking at the town. So, you couldn't do that. So, yeah, we shot a plate, and it was just it was basically simple optical. Well, I mean, digitally done, yeah. I mean, the town in reflection is what we shot, yeah.
Right. So when we get to the funeral parlor, which is the next scene where she sees the body, I read that you built a few sets. Was that one of them? You built, what sets did you actually build for this film?
That I don't believe that was one of them, because I remember it being quite difficult to control the windows in the back of that shot, because I wanted it quite dark, and I wanted the main source of light by the coffin where they're standing being an oil lamp. So that was, I believe, a building in Granger where we shot the exteriors. But the grocers and where we find Rooster at the beginning, those were sets. And we did some of the firelight. One of the firelight scenes, we did a night scene. We did it on stage because we needed to build in a certain amount of weather cover. So, we were shooting in Texas, but we also shooting in Santa Fe, our main base. Most of it was shot out of Santa Fe. So we were using Santa Fe College and their studio to put our sets in. So it was always something very adjacent. So at the last minute we could say, okay, we're going to stage now. Even if it was like we were half a day outside and got trashed, we could go to studio.
Yeah, the reason I was asking about what were sets, and like the boarding house bedroom that you said, was that a set or a location?
No, with Matt Damon, that's a set. Yeah.
And the downstairs was a set too, or just the upstairs?
Downstairs was location. Yeah. So we were mixing and matching a lot. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is there's some mix of warm and cold lighting, and if it's a location, I can imagine HMIs in the background and tungsten in the foreground to create some color temperature difference. But when you were on the sets, like in the grocery store of Rooster Cogburn, they're lit to a very warm skylight in that back room, and the store in the background is cooler in color temperature. When you're on set, do you just do all tungsten package and just use gels, like blue gels to cool off the background and warm for the foreground, and then on location would use a mix of HMIs? And
I would usually do that, yeah. And then on location, I mean, there's day interior on location, which is, what was this, the hardware store, not the hardware store, where Maddie is negotiating for the pony, and that was a location that Jess had kind of basically built the room on part of a location. So I was lighting that with all HMIs bounced. Yeah. Generally a day scene on location I would light with HMIs, but a day scene on set I would usually light with tungsten sources and either cool it down or leave it and warm up the practical sources.
Yeah, with the funeral parlor, the warm light on Maddie's face from the lantern, is that something you said that was a location where the background was dark and cool, and then the foreground was warm with the lantern that the undertaker is holding. So on her side, she's kind of got a cool backlight and background, and then she's got this orange light on her face from the lantern. when you cut to her and the lantern is not in the shot, what are you using just to put that warm light on her face? Just a dimmed little tungsten source?
Yeah, I kind of think in that case, the lantern itself was practical, so there was a flame, but there was also a little bulb behind the flame. So she was actually lit as much by the bulb as with the flame. I mean, when we, as well as I do, when you're shooting film, it's not like you can shoot with a flame on an oil lamp. You haven't got like 25,000 ASA digital camera, and you haven't got all that latitude in the digital in a film negative as you have got in a digital negative. So yeah, I mean, I would usually, if I needed to see a flame, I'd have a flame and I'd put a bulb behind it, a little, I think it was like an FEP, a little quartz 150 or sometimes 300 or something. And if I didn't need to see the flame, which is quite a lot of what I did on the assassination of Jesse James, I would use one or two bulbs. And sometimes I would line two bulbs up with a lens, and the bulb facing the camera would be dimmed down. There would be a bit of black wrap between the two bulbs, and the bulb facing away towards the subject, like in this case, Matty, would be at a higher intensity. So that way I'd get the oil lamp in a nice register, but I'd also be light in the background without flaring the lens. And anybody that knows me knows I don't like flares.
Because you're dealing with a child actor, some of the dialogue scenes, like in the street where I forgot who she's talking to, where she's asking which sheriff, which marshal to hire.
Right.
Did you ever have to do cross coverage with two cameras just because of the child thing, or you always did single camera, even with her?
I don't remember.
I don't think so, because she was amazing.
Oh no, she was amazing.
Unbelievable.
I don't remember doing any two camera work on True Grit. It might have been just for the hanging, the crowd scene where the hanging's taking place. I think then we did run two cameras with Paul Elliott was working with us at that point. But no, I mean, they very rarely, in my experience working with Joel and Ethan, they very rarely ran two cameras or run two
And I
cameras.
guess you had the option of a photo double, right? When her hours were up on set, you had a fairly good stand-in for over shoulder shots and things.
Yeah, we did. I mean, the hardest, the daylight scenes weren't so much a problem because we could sort of schedule the shots and everything. But the most difficult work was all the night work, where she's on top of the hill with Rooster looking down at the Greaser Bob's cabin and the bad guys, and then. That was difficult because we had to split scenes. We had to start one part of the scene in the first half of the night, and then we had to move to another scene entirely on the second half of the night.
It's always a trick with child actors and the time. That negotiation room scene, I saw the behind the scenes video where the art director is talking about building that on the extension of a row of buildings, and I thought how it's probably intentional, but how lucky you are that you have, instead of being one of the row offices, which only is like a railroad car, right? We only have windows at one end. You've got an end building, so you've got windows on two sides. So you've got backlight behind her, and you've got side light on him and her from the alleys, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
The light in the background behind her seems completely natural. Like there's some bit of real sun. It looks like it in the first scene, and then soft backlight. Did you mostly just light the foreground through the side windows and let the background be the natural daylight coming through the back windows? You didn't try to, or did you have to like tent or top off the real light and do it artificially?
I remember controlling how far the sun came into the space, because obviously it would change during the day, but most of the lighting was a big side bounce source. And the reason the reason the set is where it is was because we talked about it in beforehand. It was like, yeah, I did not want to shoot a scene like that in a like a shotgun house or something,
Right. In New York,
So yeah, it was deliberately put where it was.
in New York they call
I mean,
them
the
railroad
good and bad.
apartments.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's good and bad about that, because then you find you're having to control the actual sunlight, like we're talking about, because it would come in the side windows as well as the one round the front facing the street. So that's partly why I kind of do something like that with a big bounce source, because I put maybe 20 by 20s, white Grifflon or whatever it was, ultra bounce up at this point. And that would not only act as the bounce source, but it would cut the actual sunlight off the set, so all the light coming in was what I was creating on the reflectors.
I noticed that she goes back in the next day for another brief scene, and you added a little hot slash of light across his desk that wasn't in the first scene. And I don't know if you shot those two scenes on the same day and you just did that to create some feeling of the next day, and it's a morning scene. The previous scene was an afternoon scene. Do you recall your thinking on that? There was just like a bright slash of sunlight across his desk that sort of bounces a little up on him. Her side looks pretty much the same as before with the soft window light, but it caught my eye that you changed the lighting a little bit, when the temptation would be to just keep the lighting the same for both scenes. Was it just so you want to create some feeling of the next day?
Yeah, it's a new day. Next day, it was the morning, and we didn't have really much to emphasize that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I would kind of naturally think, well, keep the same source because it worked. But something like that didn't take any time. You basically had the bounce source. And I believe I just split the two bounces apart a little bit to allow hard light to come in from behind them as a sort of narrow shaft. So the bounce sources were kind of controlling the hard light in a way. Then all I had to do was put a little topper on it. Yeah. So, yeah. But I mean, you're the same. You kind of love playing with light, don't you? So, it's a different scene, different time of day. You want to do something with it.
In previous interviews, because now we're getting to like a lot of day exterior work other than the courtroom scene, your philosophy tends to be to shoot day stuff at the time of day that you want it to be, like schedule your day for the backlight you want and stuff, as opposed to doing the thing where people put 100 by silks over everything and try to control it all. So knowing that you try to be realistic and natural with your day work, how often do you still have to occasionally bring out a big overhead diffusion or a big HMI or anything to try to match? Because the sun changes, and sometimes you just get, like the sun goes away, it comes back. I know nowadays you can fix some of that with timing, where the sun goes in and out. But did you ever feel tempted to, you started your day in overcast and suddenly the sun comes out and to fly a big overhead diffusion, or the opposite, put a bright backlight from an HMI to compensate for the sun disappearing suddenly?
No, I think I must have been very lucky during my career that I never really did that. I might have done it once or twice on a close up. You get to the end of the day and you've got to cut the sun or put a fake sun in or something to match what you've been doing. But no, I think again, when you're working with Joel and Ethan and you kind of basically know the shots. I mean, the shots are going to change a bit on the day. They always do. But you know the kind of rhythm of the scene and you know how the camera's going to go around the action. So you can basically schedule what shot when. And sometimes if the sun goes in, sometimes you just live with it. Because, I mean, most of Joel and Ethan's films never had a huge amount of money to do it. They didn't. So especially, say, True Grit with all the moving and the sets, it was quite a expensive film for and not a huge budget. So you kind of trust to luck a lot. I mean, it was funny, the most contentious time about silking a set was for 1917, when a production said, well, because I kept saying, well, what's going to happen if the sun's out? because it's got to be cloud. We got to shoot the whole film under cloud, except for the last shot, but that was luck. But they said, well, can't you tent? We could do the trenches in a studio. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how much money have you got for lighting? And then they said, well, we do it outside and you can silk it. And I said, well, how are you going to silk, like 1,000 foot of trench and then not see it? That means immediately you're going to have to CG the whole thing, because by nature, one end of the trench is going to be in shot to the other. I mean, anyway, so it's I always find it interesting that things you seem obvious to you, the cinematographer, are not obvious even to some of the most experienced line producers. You know what I mean? Or maybe they're just kind of hoping you've got some kind of magic sort of trick. But no, the big magic trick is luck, really. I think.
I saw your lighting diagram about the courtroom scene, which you've talked about many times. And, and you wrote that you put half CTO on the windows in the courtroom. Do you actually put them over the whole window and not just on the light?
Yeah, I'm looking at the diagram I have now. It's not quite right, the diagram, because it's got 3 lifts and 3 pars, but I only had 2 pars. But no, I put the CTO on the windows.
Right.
Because, if you do it hard on the window, and sometimes it's a hard gel, if you put it on a lamp, I mean, an 18K par, that's an HMI, but it's still going to burn your gel out. Yeah. You put it on the barn doors and it's a windy day, then it's going to fly off and you're going to all that sort of carry on. So, basically, if I can afford it or the production can afford it, I'll have hard gels. And the nice thing about hard gels is then maybe you have 2 different NDs with it as well, so you can control the window a bit. But in this case, I believe it was soft gel. And it was on the glass, or on a frame and then put on,
The other advantage in that scene I could see is that you had some tungsten oil lamps in the courtroom. So by gelling the windows with half O, you're not getting as extreme a color temperature difference between the lamps inside and the sunlight outside. Unlike the funeral parlor, where you have quite a big color temperature difference between the oil lamp and the window light.
Which is partly for an effect.
Yes.
Yeah, you kind of funeral is you want that kind of feel, but the courthouse, it wanted to be this intense sun blasting through the window, and then when Nancy Haig, the set dresser, and we tested a whole lot of blinds, roller blinds. I suggested roller blinds so I could control exactly how far the window they would come, and then we tested all kinds of material to get that particular color and translucence,
And you might have you put a note about bobbinet or ND on the shades to control how much they cut the HMI light.
I put that note quite often. I always carry bobbinet, but I don't remember using it on this set. I mean, sometimes I would,
Yeah, I've sometimes done things like that. Like if I have curtain shears on each side of a window and they're just too hot, I'll just put a strip of ND gel right behind them so that the HMI light that's hitting the shears is not as intense. Not as necessary nowadays with the Alexa camera can handle that, but you still have to watch out for shears and things like that getting too hot.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on True Grit, again, I shot a lot of tests with the shears in the boarding house where, Matt's characters hold up. I remember I kind of dyed the shears really dark. I mean, if you'd have stood on the set and look at these shears, you'd think they were sort of dark gray. But by the time you punch the light you want through them, they just look like white shears or slightly off-white shears,
Did you shoot all your interiors on 500 speed stock, or when you had more light, did you use the 200 speed stock?
I would imagine the courthouse, which was a real courthouse in Blanco in Texas. It was a location, which was difficult actually, because it was second floor and it was a sort of period building, so you couldn't do much with it. I kind of remember shooting that on 200, actually. I might be wrong, but I think I would have shot that on 200 because I was using, 18K pars. I was getting a lot of light out of those because they were really almost full spot, you know, and almost like a hard lens. And
Yeah.
with the atmosphere and that, and the practical lights, although they were glowing, they weren't really giving any of the exposure in the scene. So it was really the paths that were lighting it. So I had plenty of light there, and it was an advantage not to have too much of a depth of field. You know, it was nice in that atmosphere to have a slightly shallower depth of field.
Yeah. Well, even the Chinese grocery store, that back room, you had that very bright skylight lighting the scene where she first goes in there. I thought you could probably shot that on 200 speed film too, because it's such a strong source. You probably had enough exposure for slower film.
I might well have, you know, I tended to, I'd really like the 200 ASA. I mean, for most part, I would use that unless I was in trouble. I mean, obviously the night shoots and that I had to shoot 500. I just couldn't have, even though I had a lot of lights, it wasn't enough.
Some of the day work, I would see some lights in the actor's eyes, and wasn't sure if that was a bounce card or did you ever I've done a little bit of westerns like on Westworld, and I actually found the cowboy hats useful because you would think, oh, this cowboy hat's going to constantly shadow the actor's face, but the truth is it keeps the high sun off their nose and their face, and then they're just lit by the bounce off the ground, and it sort of stays consistent through the day more than if they had no hat on at all. So but I noticed you would shape the light sometimes where you would have a little more of a wraparound from one side and then fall off on the other side. So were you just doing that with sort of negative and positive fill, you know, like just bring in something like some muslin on one side of the face and then a floppy on the opposite side or something just to shape the light now and then?
Yeah, usually it was a very large or a series of 12 by 12 unbleached muslin, usually, especially in the town scenes in the sunlight. I would tend to use unbleached muslin for the warmth. But then as soon as you start going into a closer shot, the thing that always struck me about those sequences is the amount of black I put on the floor. It wasn't a matter of putting it on the side so much as actually putting it beneath and around them, because you get so much coming up.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's something nice about a Western hat, you know, because you look at a film like Pale Rider or something and you don't see the eyes, you just see the shadow crossing somebody's face, and it's gorgeous. You know, I mean, I kind of like playing those shadows, but sometimes you want to see a little bit in the eyes, don't you? But I'd say usually the problem I had there on True Grit was actually cutting down the light because it was bouncing from everywhere, just as if you've been in Africa or somewhere, you know, it was just bouncing everywhere.
One of my favorite hat shots in a movie is in My Darling Clementine. It's when the Earp brothers come back at night and find their brother dead in the campfire. Rather than show the faces of the three brothers, John Ford does a high angle shot of the dead body and three hats in the foreground looking down on it with the rain. The rain is pouring off the hats.
Yeah.
So rather than get the emotional acting, he plays the emotion through these large men just in rain and their sadness. The sadness is in the composition rather than the performance.
Yeah.
But then the very next cut is a close-up of Henry Fonda kicking open a door and looking very angry, where he demands the job of sheriff in the town. He says, you know, I'll take that job. So Ford kind of saves his close-up for the next scene and doesn't use it in the scene where you'd think he'd use the close-up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. Yeah, people should watch these things. There's a lot to learn. Restraint.
It's also interesting in that movie is the very next scene. He comes downstairs after getting the job as sheriff and he runs into the Clantons who probably killed his brother. And so it's a group scene in the lobby. And Ford plays the whole sequence in silent close-ups at first before the dialogue starts. And then when the dialogue starts, he goes to wide shots and medium shots. So it's interesting. The coverage is all at the front end of the scene and it's no dialogue. It's all the stares at each other, you know, the accusations. And then, and then when they start talking, it sort of pulls back and plays loose, which is, I thought, also brilliant.
Yeah, you got to think Sergio Leone was very aware of all that style of filmmaking because he did it a lot, didn't he? You know, the train station, the good, the bad, the ugly, all these big close-ups, and then when anything happens, he comes out and lets you see it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little thing like when Maddie crosses the river and the horse. When the camera is pulling back a little with her in the water, how do you? I know it's a stunt and all that, but just to track even a few feet across a river with her as she's on this horse, so are you on shore with a crane doing a little pullback? Or are you somehow floating a camera alongside her, or
We were in a rubber dinghy, and Mitch Lillian, the grip, was controlling it. You know, I mean, yeah, we had, I think there was one shot there where she's riding the horse into the river that we had it on a crane, so we went in a bit. I can't frankly remember exactly, but for the river's quite wide. It wasn't even a river; it was part of a lake in Texas. So we had the camera. I was just shooting it handheld in a dinghy, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how
Most of
you
it.
floated that with her.
That was really tricky because it was a mock-up horse. She wasn't on a real horse.
Oh, really?
And it was being towed. Yeah, it'd been towed. And it was quite a good dummy, but I mean, we would laugh at it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was the only real way we could do it with her. She couldn't ride a little pony, and the pony couldn't do it in that water. So it was, I believe it was on a cable, and so it was quite controlled.
Well, I bought it. I didn't think about the horse being fake.
It's animated a little with CG, but I mean, most of it was in camera.
Yeah, no, it's very convincing, I thought. It's odd that occasionally, twice in the film, I saw the very subtlest of zooms. And I suspect they're just a little post-editorial thing where when you get to that shed where the two children are torturing this mule, when they first arrive and he kicks the boy off the shed. That shot looking past the mule at them arriving, there's the tiniest little bit of a float in that feels like a little zoom. And I know you wouldn't put a zoom lens on just to do something like that, but I know editors sometimes do a very subtle. If they can do a 5% zoom in digitally, sometimes editors will sneak that in. It's very subtle. And
but I mean, Joel and Ethan are their own editors, so I don't think they were doing it. You sure it wasn't a little push? I kind of remember we did a lot of.
It could have been a long lens push, and you couldn't tell. The same thing happens again when they meet the Native American in the woods, and he takes the body away, and it dissolves, I think, to the snow.
Right.
As he's riding away, it just seems to be slightly zooming with him as he's riding away. But again, it's like a few millimeters, and it could be, it could be an optical illusion, or you did a slight push in on a longer lens, so it feels like a zoom because it's not a wide angle lens or something. It's a very subtle move.
I would think it's part of a crane move. We shot a lot of those scenes on an arm or on the aero crane just to have the option to do a little push some places. So it might have been just a minuscule. I mean, I remember on True Grit that we never did like a Barton Fink. We didn't do camera moves that draw attention to themselves. They're always very subtle little drifts. So it was probably that. I probably would have noticed it.
You even carry a zoom lens?
No, on True Grit, we didn't carry a zoom lens. No,
I didn't think so.
I can't think. I mean, sometimes if there's a single shot that Joel and Ethan say, well, I think we'll need a zoom for this shot, then we'll bring one in for the day we're going to do that shot. But I don't remember one on. Do you?
Yeah.
We didn't carry one. Again, we just didn't have the budget.
Yeah, if you watch the film, you see something twice. It's just a very subtle floating move or something.
Yeah.
In general, when you're shooting outside, you start to lose the light, and you're supposed to be in daytime. What is if you've been shooting 100T or 200T, is your first thing to start pulling the filter or to switch to a faster film? Do you think if you're gonna?
No, it's usually come back the next day. Really. No, I can't think of a case with Joel and Ethan, True Grit or any other film, where we've lost the light and haven't been able to shoot it. Other than a night shot where the light's been coming up at the end of a night shoot, and you're getting in trouble that way.
Do you ever have to do the opposite? There's like shoot something at night and light it for day. There's a overhead shot of Maddie a couple times on the ground, I think, where Billy Pepper, whatever it is, he's putting his foot on her neck. And I was thinking, well, if you run out of light, I suppose, those are sort of shots they say, well, we could do it at night, just put a big bounce over her or something like that. But you were never forced to do that kind of thing where you had to pick up a day shot at night and put it against a rock or anything.
Well, there was one case we were filming in the wood with Barry Pepper, and I think it was with Maddie, yeah, where a snowstorm came in and it wasn't meant to be snowing for this particular scene. And so we started putting up overheads to cut the snow off.
Okay.
And the overheads were cutting too much light. So then I was starting to bounce something on underneath of the silk, which was I using to stop the snow falling on the shot. And then it would get like a complete, bit of chaos. And then we would be worried because the snow got so heavy, we wouldn't be able to drive out of the location and get to where we needed to be for the next day. I mean, there was quite a bit of that. But no, usually what I was going to say is because they storyboard everything, then I usually sit with it, like in this case, Betsy Magruder, the AD, and we go through the shots and we allocate a time of day to do the shot. And, how much time during, so you get half an hour or whatever for a shot. And then where you are any time during the day, if you're behind or ahead, and usually we were ahead, frankly.
I think that shot of Maddie on the ground, it explains what you just said about the snow coming and having to tent the snow off, or explains why in my brain I thought maybe this was somehow picked up at night for day, because it does feel like something lit with a big soft bounce or something like that. It's the way it's reflected in her eyes, because that's often the problem, is that the eyes see everything you're doing outside. Right? When you look close enough, you start saying, oh, I can see a 12 by in there, or I can see an HMI in there, or something like that.
Right, especially digital playback. Now you can zoom into the eye and you can see exactly how it was lit.
One of my earliest films I did was up in Big Bear, and it was a winter film, and I had to do a day scene at night in the backside of this cabin, and I prepared for it by adding more and more bounces and things. But I realized that when you try to fake a close-up at night, the eyes, even if you put like a 20 by in the eyes, it becomes a poach's stamp, and everything around it is the night sky. So the eyes give away. In the daytime, the eyes see sky, so there's a sort of glaze over the eyeball from all that real world. But as soon as you try to fake it at night, no matter how giant a soft light you build, the contrast in the eye reflection is still not quite right.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a nightmare shoot I was on one day. We shot these exteriors in this courtyard outside a factory. This was a film I did in England many, many years ago. We shot all the exteriors, then went inside, and I had to light the inside because it was a dark day, being England and raining. And so we shot all the interiors, then wrapped all the lights to go. That was the end of the day's work. As soon as the last light got into the truck, right, being wrapped away, and the tailgate was going up, the director said, "Oh no, I need a wide shot of the exterior of this courtyard with some action in the courtyard." Unbelievable. I mean, it would be dark for about 4 hours. I think we finished shooting that day. The next day at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was like crazy because all the lights had to come back out of the truck, and then it was every silk that I had to go over the top of the buildings to create some sort of sense of daylight. I mean, sometimes it's a nightmare. I always get frustrated that director doesn't understand the kind of problems of doing something like that, and the knock-on effect of it on the next day's work, because you're way behind schedule the next day with turnaround. But anyway, you just keep going, don't you?
The shootout at the shed at night, the greasy that thing,
greaser bobs.
I figure in the wide shots it's basically lit from one side with your HMIs that you set up on the hilltop. But when you get in close, like when they come up to Matt Damon on the ground and he's been shot, he's sort of just side lit by an HMI, but there's just the slightest amount of fill on his back and where you could see the bullet hole and things. So when you get a situation like that at night, did you just bring in a white card or a poly or anything just to slightly reflect into the shadows when you needed to see a little more? I know you wanted to maintain that single source look, but I felt when you got in close like that, there was just the slightest amount of reflective light into the shadows, so you could see the wound on his back and some other elements like that.
Well, I mean, I usually try and do it with a small white bounce, or if it's the white's not enough, I'll use a stipple, silver stipple, to get a bit more punch. But I mean, basically all those sequences were lit single source, but the single source was a total of, I think, 65 18Ks and 12Ks. I mean, it was a lot of lights, but it did end up looking hopefully like a single source.
Yeah, no.
But that was very difficult location. Yes.
But I was thinking in the wide shots that since you've ringed the hills with sets of HMIs, that the temptation would be to turn on a few on the opposite side to fill a little bit, but you kept everything in the wides from one direction. The shadows are fairly black.
Yeah.
But then when you get into the close-ups, I noticed you maintain that look, but you sometimes added a very slight bounce or something just when you needed to see a little further into the shadow while still maintaining that single source look. The mine shaft scene at the end of the film, was that a set? I mean, you don't often get mine shafts that you can film in, so.
Yeah, no, that was a set.
So
I mean, that was just too tricky to try and do on location. I mean, I remember we did look, but then we just thought, well, it's crazy. I mean, if you're in a mine shaft like that, you're looking up at the sky, you're not seeing anything anyway. So it's controllable. And again, at that point, we were shooting in, I think we were shooting in Austin or somewhere.
Yeah, we were in Austin at one point.
Yeah. I think that was our weather cover for somewhere like that, so it was basically built in a warehouse or some big space in an office block or something. I can't really remember, but it was a set.
The up angle looking at the sky was a big white muslin or some sort of.
Yeah, you're looking at the light source basically. Yeah. I do that a lot.
Was it a big white bounce, or did you shine something through diffusion?
No, big bounce. Yeah, I just usually put an ultra bounce. That would have been ultra bounce and just lit from the sides. Again, lit with HMIs as so as on the exterior, really.
There was a second campfire scene that was in the rain. Was that rain done on location with rain towers and things?
Yeah, that was the one in the forest, right?
There was two. The one you did on stage in the dead woods.
Yeah.
And then the second one was in the forest and in the pine trees, and there was a rain during part of it. But you brought it. That wasn't rain. It just happened to happen that on the night they brought in.
No, that was rain towers. The whole bit. That was a very, very difficult scene actually to do in that forest. And I knew I had to do firelight and a moonlight, and it wasn't like the main night stuff at Greaser Bob's where I had the option of creating big soft source with multiple single units. I didn't really have the space, and in a forest like that, and I didn't have the time to move it around very much. So it was very difficult seeing. I thought it's one of the least successful scenes in my mind I've ever shot, but especially in True Grit, which I think for the most part sort of sits together really well. But that scene, I look at it, I don't.
It looks
really
very
like
nice. I do understand what you're talking about though, because I've seen movies sometimes where they manage to avoid moonlight for a campfire scene. I mean, you've done that, and I remember watching I think The Bear, which was shot by Philippe Rousselot, and there's a campfire scene there that was just. It felt like just one fire was just lighting the whole woods, and it was fading off naturally, but there was no other light source, which was very nice. But it's hard when people have dialogue scene where they walk away from the campfire and then they talk with the campfire 20 feet in the background.
By horse.
Right. And it's like, well, there's no way that the campfire is creating any kind of light on them at that distance. So then what's lighting them. And then
Right.
now you're bringing in moonlight. And so you're establishing there
Right.
has to be moonlight mixed with campfire light. Plus, the other issue is just how big the campfire is. I've done on Westworld, I tried to do a campfire scene just lit with fire, and the director wanted a tiny campfire. He kept shrinking it and
Right.
shrinking it
Oh,
down to the point where I was like, there's no
Right.
way a fire that's this big is going to be lighting 30 feet of landscape. It doesn't make any sense. So then I had to bring in moonlight and other things because just logically,
Yeah. 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 That's a frustration. I did first off think about lighting the whole sequence with the firelight, but then we were on location. It's in a forest, and you wanted to see the forest. And as you say, the main action moved away from the fire, and it's in the rain. And yeah, I mean, there's no way you could have done it with the fire as a source. And if you had done, it would have meant kind of really lighting each shot separately. You couldn't have just lit the space with a light big enough. It wasn't like the cathedral in 1917 where you use a big light source and shoot by it. You couldn't have done that. You would have had to light it shot by shot, which just would not have worked in our schedule.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a compromise, but you do have to make compromises.
I think it's only something other cinematographers think about. It's like,
Probably.
anyone who's had to
Yeah.
deal with
Yeah.
that, where you have one light source and then all the actors walk away from it and their backs to it, and you think like,
Yeah. Yeah.
reality there'd be
Yeah.
completely silhouette, but you have to see.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a horror film where, on location, the director complained there's too much light everywhere. It was all a moonlit house and a moonlit street, and I was using big HMIs. And I said, "Well, I'm barely getting an f2 on my lens," but to their eyes, it seemed like a lot of light because no one in reality goes
Right.
outside and has a scene lit with 18Ks. They don't understand the exposure. But in post, it was the opposite problem. They kept brightening everything. And I said, "Why are you brightening it? On the location, you kept complaining there was too much light." And she goes, "Well, I can't see the performance. I can't see the eyes. I need to." And I was like, so the priorities
Oh,
completely
yeah.
switched, and I try to
change. Yeah.
Huge,
remember
yeah.
that, sometimes ultimately, when they get into editing, what they care about is seeing the acting. And so you do have to try to get a light in the eyes, even though it's not always motivated, realistically. It's just the audience wants to see the emotion in the character's face, so you try to get something.
Yeah. Well, let's say it's a whole balance between seeing a performance, creating the mood, then the schedule and the budget and everything else, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, like on True Grit, the night scenes at Greaser Bob's. I mean, I was using, I think it was like 30 or 40 HMIs, 18s and 12Ks, and that's a huge amount of light. But actually, I was only shooting at 222.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
the actual what ended up there. But by doing the whole rig that I did, which was quite complicated and took a couple of weeks to actually put up, we could actually move from one scene to another at a flick of a switch virtually. And we could basically keep to schedule, which was, quite something on,
Yeah.
tricky night stuff with action and horses and gunfighting and so it's all a
Yeah,
balance, isn't
that's
it?
right. No, that's what you have to do sometimes. Well, that was all my questions based on watching the film. We've talked an
Oh,
hour.
that's great.
But
Yeah.
watching it again, I think what struck me as being different about this as a Western was the language. It's the dialogue is Coen Brothers love to write this kind of, I don't know, you call it a regional dialect thing, where you just the way people talk in this film is so almost like religious, it's like something out of the Bible. And between the dialogue
Yeah.
and
Well,
the performances you got out of the actors, it's just you didn't get it.
there are no
Yeah.
contractions. They don't say I'm, they say I am, or
Yeah.
no she's, she is.
Yeah.
But they do it so naturally.
Yeah.
They work so hard on it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Quite wonderful. I think they did a lot of work to get to that. That way of speech.
Yeah. It's also
It's funny you haven't asked about the most difficult scene that gives me nightmares or gave me nightmares on that film, which was
the riding across the landscape.
yes. How do you film a black horse at night?
Yes.
When you don't have, huge Musco lights or whatever, and you want to track with a horse, a girl riding a horse at speed, you want to track for like...
She was wearing black too.
Yeah, she's wearing black, and he's basically... And then, you want to track, 200 or 300 feet. I mean... The inverse square law really does come into effect then, it's like, becomes really scary. I mean,
how many lights did you end up using for that field?
Not many, you see, because I'd used all the lights for the greaser bulbs. I'd kind of done a big rig on that. So for when we were doing Blackie, well, I mean, I couldn't do another big rig. And so also when you've got a horse riding at night and the horse is black, and the background's black because you haven't got enough light to light the whole distance. I said to them, why don't we just do it on a treadmill? All you're going to get is a horse's head going up and down. And we did do some of the actors on a treadmill, but the actual shots of the horse riding, I said, well, why don't we do it in the cottonwoods? So we actually built a track in the cottonwoods so that you could see something moving by the horse. And then we shot some out in the open plains as well, and they put in some starlight in the background. And then to do the final, but it was really hard because I say, if you're tracking with a horse for a long distance, and we did a lot of tests because, again, the horse had to be okay with whatever we were tracking with. So we had an electric tracking vehicle and a little jib arm and a Libra stabilized head, right? But when you're tracking, you get up to the speed of the horse, right? And you get the shot. And then how long have you got before you run into the light? Because you can't put the light to the side. You can't put it behind the camera. You can't put it in front of the camera. So the horse has got to be running towards the light, right? I mean, let's face it. Now, the light has to be high enough that somehow you can shade the nearest version towards the light and punch it further into the distance. But, anyway, you can draw a diagram of this and you have days, nights of not sleeping, which is what I had. And, but anyway, we did eventually get it. And then to have the shot of Blackie dying, I said to the guys, I said, please don't stand it on a brow of a hill against the night sky. So what am I going to do, So we found a place where the horse could collapse against the grass, right? So I could skid some light across the grass and you get a silhouette against something anyway. That was funny. It's funny now, but at the time it was
not very funny.
Oh boy, wow.
Were the HMIs on a hill? Did you find a hill to put them on, or did you have to put them all on lifts to get them high enough?
Yeah, the one in the forest, going through the cottonwoods, I did have an 80-foot crane, and I put a row of, I think it was probably 5 HMIs on a truss on a crane up. So, because we were tracking with it, I don't know how far, but, like a few hundred feet. I mean, quite a long run. So you had to find a way of evening up the whole length of the run, I mean, you could do a bit of a stop pull, but this was film. It wasn't digital where you're seeing what you're doing and everything. And then when it was running across the plain, I mean, I didn't do a rig, so I had another lift that could drive in, and we set it up, and we basically the tracking vehicle was just tracking on the actual grass, we didn't prep it.
But the HMIs were on another lift. They weren't on a hill. So you didn't find a convenient hilltop overlooking that plain.
No, they were on a lift. There wasn't anywhere I could really do that and keep them out for the whole night.
I thought was interesting is that you lit that huge field, but you still put a little dark band in the center for when the horse collapses. Like they're almost silhouette at the moment riding somebody,
Yeah.
you put kind of a band of darkness to create some
Right.
contrast with the horse against the field, so it wasn't just lit. You
Right.
as if there's a hill.
Even though it was a black, even though it was a black horse, I was worried about lighting it in that case because I'm shooting it as a silhouette.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I wanted to justify the light being less even
Right.
over everything because I couldn't light the whole hill.
Right.
So at places it was falling off. So I thought, well, if I put a shaft of shadow where the horse is, it'll serve two purposes.
Yeah,
you
it
know?
feels like a hillside creating a shadow in between two open areas.
Yeah.
But also atmosphere-wise, it creates a little mood. Still the shape of the horse and stuff. Did you do some green screen work with her on the horse and him, and some? I think I read you did both black screen and green screen or something. You did some just against black and some against green.
Yeah, I forget what the reasons were, but again, the whole sequence was storyboarded. So we had a meeting and broke it all down into different parts, how we were going to do it, and we had a dummy horse and all the rest for different sections. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this.
Well, thank you for answering all my questions. Sorry, there's one other question I had. It's pretty minor.
Okay.
Because when I've done a landscape film, one of the things I kind of like is that when you're out in the great outdoors, you don't have space limitations in terms of using lenses. You can, if you want to shoot a landscape on 100 mil or 18 mil, it's just a matter of what works for the shape of the trees and the size of the hills. And so when you're outside, I know as a Western, you tend to gravitate towards the wider lenses just because of the landscape. But did you pick your lenses based also on your compression of the hillside, the horses, the distant mountains and stuff like that? Were you kind of just working on different focal lengths based on the space itself, or did you have a kind of formula for which lens you would use for which shots outside once they do the horseback riding?
I kind of, I'm a bit against using long lenses because you kind of create a shot in a landscape. I mean, it did happen, I suppose, once or twice, but generally I'd stick to the same pattern of lens choice and only go on a longer lens if it was a point of view or for a particular effect. So, I mean, most of the landscapes, as far as I remember, are shot on the wider lenses. I mean, the shot of Cheney at the beginning you mentioned against the dark sky of him running away is a slightly longer lens, but then that could be a point of view. That's an effect, really. But I do like the choice of the lens is kind of more at the direction of the actors and the characters. You know what I mean? Whether it's say a point of view or with one character and not another. I don't.
I was thinking. I was talking more about the extreme wide shots of the three of them on horseback going across this endless landscapes. I just, from my experiences, that sometimes when when you have nothing but a giant field and a giant distant mountains and different focal lengths, just make it look, the shapes are different. When I did North Fork in the Great Prairies there in Montana with the Rocky Mountains in the background, I would alternate between the 40 mil anamorphic, which is like a 20 mil, or I'd go to I think it was the 100 mil anamorphic, which is like a 50 mil. And the only reason is that the wide angle would make the prairies look bigger with the big rolling hills. But the 100 mil made the Rocky Mountains look taller because they were in the far background.
Yeah,
so I would alternate between those two lenses based on whether I wanted to emphasize the mountain range or the rolling hills. And it was just interesting because I had all the space in the world. I didn't have to worry about backing into a tree or a wall or anything. So it's kind of fun I think to think about how the lens affects the space, when you're not,
as
opposed to an interior where if you can't move a wall, people often say, why did you shoot your master on a 21 mil. It's all because I'm
Yeah.
backed into a wall and
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a head to toe or something. It's
Yeah.
kind of
I usually get a chainsaw out and cut the wall down. But,
yeah. I saw.
I think lens choice is really important.
Yeah. I saw a video of Kurosawa doing one of his last films, and he built all his sets so he could pull the wall so he could shoot, the master on a 75 and then move in on a 75. He would,
Right.
he liked the wide shots on a long lens because he liked the compression out the windows. There's a scene in a
Right.
castle in Kagamusha, I think, which all they built was this castle interior with big windows looking out on the lake, and all they built was the floor, the window wall, and the ceiling, and otherwise it's like a silent movie set. It's just the camera is like 300 feet away on dolly track, following them on a telephoto lens, but it makes the waves of the lake out the window look gigantic, like a violent kind of stormy sea going on in the background of the shot, and the lake becomes this big presence out the windows because of the long lens. But he had to build the set to accommodate that lens.
Yeah, but that's a point with Kurosawa. It's very interesting that his later films, like Ran in particular, seem to be shot on very long lenses.
Yeah.
But early on, Rashomon or Throne of Blood, that's not particularly long lenses.
Yeah, he kind of.
You don't see that many long lenses.
He kind of evolved into that. I mean, look at Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
Most of the interiors in Seven Samurai seem to be shot with like a 35 or 50, more normal lenses. And then he gets to the action. He started to experiment with multiple cameras for the horses in the rain. So you start to see longer lenses for the action sequences. And I think he took that approach that he was shooting action in Seven Samurai, started applying it to shooting dialogue in his later films. But in the 50s, he's more in the medium focal length range. Yeah, I think what's interesting about Seven Samurai is that someone said he never repeats a setup. In his later films, you sense the multiple camera style of shooting, but in Seven Samurai, every shot, at least the dialogue scenes, every shot is a new angle. He starts part of the scene in here, and he cuts to this angle, and he cuts to this angle, but he never comes back to a setup. He's always constantly moving forward to a new setup, shot by shot. It's a very interesting way of directing.
Right. I would say it's unique. It's not unique. It's just seldom seen these days because you're not allowed the time and
yeah. Well, it's
filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to talk to you. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Pleasure reliving these nighttime nightmares of how to shoot a black horse against the night sky.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thanks again for doing this.
Yeah,
it's great.
Thanks, David. It's brilliant.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.